Greetings! I just picked up a load of Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1 components, all sorts of components. I got a pile in the garage right now and I'm going through everything. And the second candidate I picked up is the monitor that they all came with. It's actually a rebadged RCA monitor, black and white, and this one is dead, completely dead, nothing. No high voltage, no nothing. So this is a good place to get started on my pile, and let's see if we can repair this. Now, most of the stuff was not very clean, and this one was actually really filthy. I kind of cleaned it up a little bit so I would be more comfortable touching it when repairing it. But yeah, let's take out some screws and see what ails this guy. Looks like this one was manufactured in August of '78, which makes it, what, 45 years old. And yeah, let's see what fun awaits us. Well, if the monitor's dead, completely dead, it's got to be a fuse, right? Well, at least it's got to be the power supply. So that's where we'll start looking. When I opened this one disquieting thing I saw, it doesn't have a high voltage cup here. And looking at it, I'm not sure. I do see a small circular outline here where there may have been one at some time, but there's none there now, so I'm going to have to come up with something to cover that. But for now, we are unplugged, and we can start poking around. So following the AC path, one leg of the AC goes into this fuse over here. It's a 4 amp fuse. It then has a safety capacitor going to ground, and then that feeds another fuse over here, which is a 1 amp fuse, and then the 1 amp fuse feeds the rest, feeds the bridge and all the other stuff. So I measured both fuses, and they were both good. Boo. But, as I have, or may have preached before, don't measure the fuses themselves. Well, in this case, it's fine because it's a pigtail. But in this case, it's got clips. And when I measured the clips, it was, well, it wasn't open, but there was a really, really, really high resistance. So I pulled out this fuse, and I looked. There was no corrosion at the clips or on the fuse. I cleaned everything anyway. I put it back in, and I read near 0 ohms all of a sudden. So something got in there, and I guess it's time to give it another try. At this point, we should probably turn it on and see if at least the neck lights up. And okay, so let's see. The switch is off in the front, power strip is on, it's plugged in, and oh, I heard some crackling. and the tube's lighting up. No smoke, no really bad things happening. So I guess it's time to plug in, give it a signal, and see if we already fixed it. Okay, I plugged in a TRS-80. Let's power it up. And well, still no smoke, no whistling, no nothing. So looks like we fixed this one. I'm going to let it sit for a while, make sure it doesn't go up in smoke, and then we'll figure out what to do next. Well, I let it run for about half an hour, and it still hasn't blown up, and it seems to be working just fine. So let's figure out what we're going to do about the missing high voltage insulator cap. Well, I tried to come up with some solution for this. Dielectric grease, dual or repurpose a household item or something to put over it. But then I figured, let's look at another one, see how they did it. So what we have here is one from February 1980. And yes, it doesn't have one either. I mean, they made pretty drawings around it, but it's still sitting out in the open. So I guess we won't be doing anything else. And that means that this guy is done. Oh, and finally, I sprayed some contact cleaner into the brightness and contrast adjusters here and here. They got a hole in the back, but also where the contacts come out, there's a wide open spot. So go ahead and spray it with some contact cleaner and work them a bit, because they were both causing weird things on the screen when I used them, and that got rid of that problem. Well, that was somewhat of a lame problem. I'm not complaining too loudly. It got fixed quickly, but we got some time. Let's have a look at a second one. That is this guy, and this one is from, let's have a look, see here. This one is February 1978, and here's the problem we're having. What this one does, or I should say doesn't do, we'll turn it on and give it a little bit of warm up, and we see it obviously has high voltage and it has raster. But when I turn on the computer, nothing happens. If I check the cable, the computer's good, because it was the one that powered the last one. So we seem to have some problems with the video interface board on this one. Here's a video interface board. It takes the video signal from the computer and uses an opto-isolator to completely decouple the ground and power from the monitor. And the reason for that is the monitor has a hot chassis. There is no ground pin on the plug. It is polarized, so you should not have a problem with it, but I guess if you push hard enough, you can defeat a polarized 2-pin prong tube. So we have the signal coming in through this cable. The computer also supplies 5 volts to make the computer side work, and it conditions the signal, amplifies it. Then here's the opto-isolator, and then this side of the board is the monitor itself, using the monitor ground. I mean, this lifts the ground. There is no direct ground connection between the computer and this, and that's why we're using an opto-isolator. I spent quite some time on this board, being very careful how you hook up your scope and all of that because of the hot chassis. I would not recommend you use a scope on a hot chassis if you don't know 100% what you're doing. Death, damage, and all sorts of other things may result from your actions, so be very careful. But I kind of followed, on the computer side, I followed the incoming signal using the computer ground, and which is of course fully isolated from this side. And to check this side, you don't even have to power up the monitor because the computer powers this part itself. And the signals just didn't look right. I kind of got something that looked like video, but it just wasn't. The amplitudes were very low, and no wonder that it wasn't working. So what I did was, I was being careful on the computer side, but this thing wasn't working right. And since there's not that many parts on here, I went ahead, I checked all of the passives. If a capacitor returned a strange reading, I would pull one leg of it and test it again. And bottom line was everything on this board checked out okay. The only thing I couldn't really test off board was the opto. And so what I did, I pulled out the old opto, put in a socket, and put in a new opto. And guess what? It still didn't work. So I threatened the monitor that I would take it to the landfill if it didn't give me a hint of what was wrong with it, but it blissfully ignored me. Or did it? Well, I started measuring grounds and wanted to see just the connection between this board and the chassis. And I found that the ground on this side, which is the monitor video signal side, was not connected to the chassis. This chassis, which is common. So we had a problem here. It came all the way to the edge connector, but then it didn't come to the board. And as simple as that seems, I couldn't figure it out. And then it hit me. Here's a board plugged in exactly the same way as in the other one. But then I noticed that there's no connectors on this. There's no contacts on this side of the board. The contacts are on this side. But if we look closely at the connector at the receptacle, the contacts on the receptacle, the contacts are on this side, and there are no contacts on the other side. And that's the same with the other connector. The contacts are facing left, but on the board, the contacts are facing to the right. So this board was not connected to the monitor at all. Now what do? The only way this would work is if we rotated this board like this and plugged it in. Sounds scary, doesn't it? But after looking at it, the board, you can flip the board. It is physically symmetrical. The board will fit in like this with the component side facing to the right rather than to the left, which is what they were like when I opened it up. Well, it can't, there's no way it's going to work if there's no contacts there, so I checked and checked and checked, and finally I inserted the board this way around. And when I did that, well, let's actually do it and see if we can create fireworks. Well, it fits. And let's power it up and see what happens. I mean, I checked. We now have a good ground connection on the monitor electronic side to the chassis. So, okay, let's press the power button, see what happens. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, the neck lit up. There is no smoke of any kind. No weird noises, no clicking, no nothing. So let's see if that fixed it. Okay, ready to turn on power. And we're in business. Can you believe that? Somebody was in here long time ago, and the reason I'm saying long time ago is, you know, the wire memory was indicating that the board was installed correctly with the components facing that way. Wait, I have to look. No, with the components facing this way. But that's because it probably sat there for years and the wire adapted that path. So now I had to kind of tuck the wire in because it didn't want to stay in place. So wire memory is not necessarily a good indicator of what goes where, especially if somebody installed it wrong. But here it is. And it looks like this one got fixed too. Again, I'm going to let this one sit for a while monitoring it closely to see if anything bad happens. But I mean, the fix makes perfect sense. It's just, thanks guys for building a board that is basically physically ambidextrous, that you can plug in either way. Fortunately, there were only contacts on one side, so we didn't have damage. Now, if that video board had contacts on both sides and you plugged it in the wrong way, well, your guess is as good as mine as what horrendous damage would have been done, especially if the computer got connected to the hot chassis. So here are our fruits. Here are the fruits of our labor for this episode. Briefly recapping, this guy had a uncooperative fuse clip that didn't even look corroded, but I cleaned it up, probably shook up something in there while I was working on it, put the fuse back in, and it worked. This one, as you just saw, had a daughter board plugged in the wrong way. So these are usually cases that people talk about: check fuse clips, make sure everything's connected right. And these proved those two typical cases. Yes, things like that do happen. Again, I can't overemphasize the fact that when working on monitors, if you don't know what you're doing 100%, don't work on monitors. The whole idea with hot chassis, and basically in a worst case scenario, the whole chassis is connected to the AC hotline, it will cause damage to you, equipment, and it'll be unpleasant overall. So don't do it if you're not 100% sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time.